I left the city, I've been browsing, treading water that they drowning. My head on the swivel, yeah. It's only really my surroundings.
Hello and welcome to episode 101 of the Smash Accept podcast. I'm your host, Michael Royer. You can find me on Twitter at Dynasty_DadFF. We got a great show for you tonight. I'm super excited to, announce both of our guests here. Mung is having the night off. He's been on every single pod since this got started, but he's got his draft tonight, and he's like, sorry, Dad, I'm going to need a night off. And John's traveling the world like he always is. But I got two guys that, started out in the Smash Accept listener leagues, then in the Patreon. Two of the guys that I respect most in the industry. Two guys that are under 1,000 follows that absolutely deserve your follow because they've been putting out great content. They're great guys in general. Good fantasy minds, but even better guys that I talk to all the time for Dynasty trades. So without further ado, I want to introduce Adam Armour. Welcome back to the show again. I'm super excited to really dive into this 22 class, dive into what's going to happen here in the next couple weeks because it's almost season.
Yes, sir. Happy to be on, and happy to be on with the other two gents. We'll introduce the latter here in a second. But thanks for having me on. And it's preseason's over, and it is regular season time, baby. And
our first time guest here, super excited. You've probably heard his name on the podcast quite a bit because he's been so active in the Patreon, so active in all the Smash leagues. He put out some great threads this week that we're going to talk about. Super excited to have you on the show. Josh Brown, how you doing tonight?
Oh man, I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. This is just exciting. I love the Smash Accept podcast and learn so much, and hopefully going to share some knowledge too.
And that's what we love about the community, is like the Smash Accept community is you guys are so sharp and so active in that Patreon chat. I'm like, these guys like literally know their stuff more than me a lot of times, and I'm just like, I bounce trade offers off of you guys. And again, guys, if you guys could, Josh, if you could share your Twitter handle, guys, I highly suggest following him, checking out his thread that he just put out on Jahan Dotson. If you want to drop that again.
Yeah, it's JB Undershepherd. So that's the way you do it. Capital JB Undershepherd. You're welcome to follow, and going to be putting out some more threads soon. So stay tuned.
Yeah, that was great work. And so the idea of tonight's show is we have we've been trying to tell a lot of cautionary tales about camp hype and trying to help you guys figure out what to do. And it's been a while since we talked about these 22 rookies, and we want to talk about some of the guys that are booming, some of the guys that values are just through the roof right now. And first off, you can't talk about value on Dynasty Twitter without talking about Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce right now, is in a situation where there's a lot of analysts out there saying you should sell a 23 first for Dameon Pierce. There's a lot of people out there making some crazy values off of that name cachet, off of what's going on here. I'll start with you, Adam, here is the idea that's going out there is that people are just super excited about this prospect. They're jumping in and they're going in full force, and I think what we need to talk about is this is a guy with day 3 draft capital. This is a guy that, is going to be on what I believe to be a poor offense. We're excited that he's a running back. If you're buying him in redraft, I'm all for it. I am all for it for a one year rental and try to go with things. But in Dynasty, I am seeing trades that just blow my mind, Adam.
Yeah. He is really an intriguing prospect, but I think really the cautionary tale here, exactly what you mentioned, Dad, and that's really going back to value insulation. We preach it all the time, right? If you're talking about them having multiple first-round picks next year, and even if he has a good year, it kind of reminds me of a James Robinson type of player, right? Where even if he has a really good year, who's stopping them from drafting somebody of much higher draft quality, right? And then on top of that, we'll get into it in a bit when we're looking at his profile. What is his true upside, right? So it's kind of looking at what's his insulation, what's his upside, and comparing that to what the market is saying and his market value. And that's kind of goes back to our philosophy I think we all share, which is if we can build insulation while swapping values and diversifying your portfolio, I'm all for it. So that's kind of, I thought I would touch on the philosophy as well with thinking about as values rise, it's not just to dump it, it's also to dump it for the right asset.
Well, and I think, and we talk about that a lot with your background and financial portfolios and investments and things like that, and trying to put Dynasty in that sense. Josh, we're talking about a guy who on rookie draft, if you had your rookie draft in April and May, this was a guy that you were getting in that mid-second right now, right? And I think I want to talk a little bit about your philosophy with that. Is I've been getting a lot of questions being like, yo, Dad, I paid a 22 second. I drafted him at 204. What kind of cash out value should I be considering? I mean, what to you is good principle to just say, this is where we're at, this is the profile, what should I be trying to get?
I mean, if you can get a 2023 one, then fantastic. I mean, that seems to be, we've seen multiple trades go through with that. That would be my first goal just because of market value. But in reality, I don't think really all that much has changed from when he was being drafted in rookie drafts, meaning I don't think anybody who drafted him really thought Marlon Mack was going to hold him off for a long time, or these other guys. That's the unique thing about Dameon Pierce right now. It's like he's doing what he's supposed to have done, and now all of a sudden he's being hyped like he's the next greatest thing. And so personally, I don't think I would acquire. I'd probably acquire him with a late 2023 too. But that's just because I view him as really, one of those fool's gold assets where it's ends up being 1 year of really okay value, but almost no long-term certainty or security. And what is the upside? I know we're going to talk about that, but he's on a Texans team that's going to be bad with a bad game script. And there's a lot of things working against him where he could be a very good runner. So I'm trying to sell with the market being so high right now. If I can get anything with a 2023 one, if I can add a 3 to him to get a 2023 one, I'd love to do that too.
Yeah, and that's a great way to go about that. I mean, I was looking at Mike Clay's projections, and he updated him recently. He has Pierce going for 196 carries, 843 yards, 5 touchdowns, 27 receptions, 200 yards. And that feels about right, and I feel like that it would be a very productive season. And we're not saying that Dameon Pierce doesn't have talent. I mean, when I had Derek Brown on the show back in February, he was at the Senior Bowl. He said, and when I asked him about Dameon Pierce, it wasn't talking about him on the football field first, which I thought was interesting. He was like, oh, super cool guy. He was someone that, was very approachable and said, and we were talking about his draft capital being that round 3, round 4 kind of guy that could sneak in on lineups, and now we talk about a guy that we're talking he has moved into in redraft 4th round area, in dynasty startups. We're seeing some crazy talk about where he's at right now. And I think that what we're really trying to say is, he has competition, right? Marlon Mack's gone. But this is the competition that he needs for not just this year, but next year. The Texans' offensive line, not a very good offensive line. It's in the bottom third when it comes to run blocking. The Texans' offense in general, not going to be high scoring, right? I mean, Josh, you alluded to it. We're looking at a lot of negative game scripts here. That, in my mind, leads to a lot more Rex Burkhead than it does Dameon Pierce in that area. Rex Burkhead is out there on a lot of waiver wires. He's one of those super underrated guys, but it seems like once or twice a year he pops off for 20 points. If given the opportunity, he's going to be there in that situation, and I'm not saying you go buy Rex Burkhead, but he's a guy you can get thrown in deals, guy that might be out there on your waiver wire that's definitely worth picking up as well. You got to look at the Texans have 2 23 firsts in a class that has, and we've been hyping it forever. We've been talking about this 23 first. This is a team that's going to have a high draft pick in that 2nd round. They're going to probably be looking quarterback with an early 1st, but in that early 2nd, there are going to be some absolute stud running backs that they're going to have a hard time passing on. And just like Adam alluded to with James Robinson, also look at a guy like Michael Carter. I think we're looking at a guy who has that day 3 draft capital, who's drafted in rounds 3, rounds 4, rounds 5, who could produce, but they're easily replaceable, right? Like, it doesn't say to a team, even if he pops off this year, even if he rushes for 1,000 yards, it's going to be tough if you pay a 23 first to recoup that kind of value. They have the 23 second, 23 thirds. So there's a lot of things in the way of a long-term value here. But I'm seeing some trades, that just blow my mind. And then I'm seeing some trades where I'm like, okay, I can see this a little bit. The one trade that I saw recently blows my mind from where we were, 2 months ago. It was Kenneth Walker for Dameon Pierce and a 24-second. To me, that is like almost an instant loss. That's the way we're looking at a guy with a really high pedigree who was fantastic in college. And, Adam, I know you and I have talked about Kenneth Walker in the past. This one feels like if you're making this kind of move, it's an overreaction and almost like to me, an instant loss of value.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the way that this kind of going back to, I know I always go to the financial comparisons, but it kind of feels like the GameStops and all those the raves of the meme stocks, from a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. When people get into a player, it's nothing can get into its way for momentum. But our pause when we're looking at this is I thought I would add, let's really look at what is the realistic upside for him, because I think if you look at like that trade that you just mentioned, Dad, you're talking about potentially a second or third round startup pick next year as the value you're giving up there, right? Versus, if you go look at the profile for Pierce, he's no longer in the league, just retired, but it's Chris Carson, right? If you look at just the value he had, and I think he had a great career. I'm not saying Pierce is going to be Chris Carson, but I'm just looking at what's a realistic upside, and then let's compare that value of what is that ceiling. And, looking at his historical values, you're talking about a late third, early fourth. So that's kind of the way I look at Pierce, is that I don't think he's going to get up there, but that would be a realistic ceiling because they have average speed, below average explosiveness, grinder type of back. So less catches, right? So you're talking about limited upside from that regard. You guys talked about the offense beautifully already, but I think that is the most realistic upside case for him. So the guys that are trading, what you're mentioning there, the Walker, I've also seen, a first, and I saw first and a third for Pierce. It's just some crazy values being thrown out there. You got to pump the brakes because you're basically buying him at or above his realistic ceiling, which, to your point, Dad, is a losing proposition. You got to make sure that if you're buying, which I don't mind, right, for competing teams, he's a great RB3. To put on the flex and to put, but you got to make sure that you're buying them at either at value, which is definitely nowhere close to a first, back to Josh's point.
Yeah, and some of the values, looking at Trade Finder right now, over at DLF, and I saw Ryan McDowell posted out there, Dameon Pierce for Byron Pringle in a 23 first. The fact that we're getting on top of a 23 first, it's not like Byron Pringle has a lot of value here. Looking at another one, Darrell Williams, who I think is a nice handcuff, and a 23 first for Dameon Pierce. We're looking at another one here, Aaron Jones and Dallas Goedert for Dameon Pierce. Yeah. That guy should be just, his Insanity. Fingers should be broken from the smash accept button. Like that guy texted all his buddies and be like, can you believe what I just saw? I got Jerry Jeudy and a 23 second for Dameon Pierce. Every single one of these is just bad dynasty principle. And Josh, you and I have talked about it quite a bit, is like, there is an investment. You made an investment of a second round pick. If you are able to get these kind of values, that's fantastic. But as a whole, this is just bad principle the whole way across.
Well, and just to comment on that, here's the missing piece in some of these things, right? It's one thing to have an owner of a dynasty team that says, all right, I'm going to go for it. I would like to use my picks to acquire a piece that I think will get me there. But here's the thing. When you send a 2023-1 for Dameon Pierce, in the season, we see this so many times where somebody who, maybe the Derrick Henry owner, for example, is realizing after 3 or 4 games, they have nothing left, right? They got nothing left. I view Dameon Pierce as a younger version of a very similar situation of a Derrick Henry, in the sense of 1, maybe 2 years of relevance left. So would I rather get the difference maker of Derrick Henry, or it doesn't have to be Derrick Henry, but use my 2023-1 to get someone else that you can acquire instead of a Dameon Pierce? That's my biggest problem. Is it's not really in. You can like Dameon Pierce, that's fine, but to settle to buy him with a 2023-1 when so many other great players would net you that. Or you could get that with the 2023-1. It's not only, I guess, poor process, but it's just missed opportunity. And so So that, I think, is my biggest problem is you should just hang on a little bit longer and use that 2023 one or other asset like the Judy in 2023 two. Oh my goodness, that's painful. That is so painful because uh,
You're going to
I would
lose
have been fine with.
twice potentially on that one.
Yeah, yeah, it hurts really bad. The 2023 two alone could be better than Damian Pierce next year, let alone Judy with this new offense. He could be the guy. He could have a cup level meteoric rise. So it's a little bit painful to hear you read those.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, we talked about it. All three of us backstage have leagues where we have 5, 6, 7. Adam, I'm not going to lie, I got 9, 23 first, you know that. But I got to get that in there. But we're at a spot where some of those 23 firsts, especially, those later ones, if you're willing to move those, I mean, we have some guys in Smash 5 at Wackman sent out. He gave up his 23 first for James Conner and Gabriel Davis. With both of those guys could be solid productions, and Gabriel Davis could be worth a 23 first eventually. I've seen guys in my league trade a 23 first for Dalvin Cook because the guy's out of contention. He's like, just take it. I mean, if someone comes to you today and says, hey, do you want Dalvin Cook, who's going to be a top 5 running back, or Dameon Pierce, who could be, a RB2 this year? And that's the kind of cautionary tale that we're trying to throw out there, is just understand those kind of situations. Today I saw a couple that weren't too bad though. I saw one was Ezekiel Elliott and a 23 second for Dameon Pierce. Now I would rather in this situation, if you have Dameon Pierce, you go out there and you buy Ezekiel Elliott and you have the insulation of that 23 second, where both of those could be, I think, if you ask me today, I'm saying Ezekiel Elliott is going to outscore Dameon Pierce in my mind. Then you get that 23 second on top of that. I feel like that's a move where you guys could go out there. I saw a Twitter poll today was 70-30 in favor of Dameon Pierce over Tony Pollard. Another guy that's, going to have great flex value. The Patreon chat loves those kind of, loves Tony Pollard, loves that kind of move. And I think there's still some value to be had there. Most of us aren't going to get a 23 first, but I feel like if we settle somewhere in that area, I would much rather have Tony Pollard. I would much rather have Ezekiel Elliott in a second, but we start to get into an area where it starts to be a little bit more dicey. Like, are we willing to, Adam, if someone came to you and you were on a contender and they wanted your 24 first, we're going to talk about those 24 firsts, which have become a lot more achievable. The 23s, we're not getting them anywhere, but if someone comes to you and says, hey, are you willing to take a shot on Dameon Pierce for a 24 first? That becomes a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think 24 first, and we've talked about, especially when we're talking about the 23 firsts and valuations. I don't think it's changed too much. I think people are more apt to sell a 24 first than a 23 first because we're in point season and people aren't thinking 2 years out as much as, say, a couple weeks ago. Mm-hmm. So I think definitely that is an area to kind of look at. I think that's closer to value. It just always goes back to, construction, build, and then, it's not all about the upside. It's also about the insulation, like you said, Dad. So I think it's just feeling your team out, your team, but also your league mates out. And you might find that your league is cold on him, which is fine, right? I also think there is a situation where Pierce owners, whether you are contending or not, just as a hold, right? But you also need to, trying to see if you can take advantage of these skyrocketing prices and the excitement around him, which is warranted. But just kind of back to the tale of make sure that we are being cautious, not being too bullish. Let's be realistic about it.
So if you're on a complete rebuilding team, right, and you're on a team that, he fell to you in the mid to late second, and you're in that scenario where you picked him up, I mean, Josh, what are you doing in that area? Because to me, and we talk about it a lot, when you're doing those rebuilds, you want to create that positional void at the running back position, and the running back position gets injured the most, where if Dameon Pierce goes out there week 1 and struggles, and week 2, maybe gets a hamstring injury, I feel like that's the situation where we got to strike while the iron's hot and try to be aggressive. We talk about a lot of times, and I know you're doing some rebuilds and some retooling teams or year 1 punts, and I think those guys that have Dameon Pierce, now is the time. I mean, we got to strike there. We don't want to put ourselves in a position where we're like, hey, we're selling him for anything, but I think we need to start having some one-on-ones and see what we can get for him.
Absolutely. And even I'm so far off the Dameon Pierce train that I wouldn't even consider a 2024 one to use to acquire him, and just especially relative to other players you could get for that 2024 one at this
If that
time.
stings, since I know you're a big Washington fan, all right, Dave Hellman, awesome guy. That's at Dynasty Dorks. He put a thread out there, and a lot of them are like Saquon Barkley versus Damian Pierce. And believe it or not, it's like 82-18. Your boy Antonio Gibson, who now, the horrible situation there with Brian Robinson, but Antonio Gibson's got to be that number one guy. Twitter has it at 600 votes, 74% Damian Pierce over Antonio Gibson, who has been a fringe RB1 back-to-back seasons. He also has one of the other one that I thought was real interesting was 60-40, almost an pretty even split there with Kenneth Walker. So like these are some guys where there's definite value to be had there in this opportunity.
Yeah, I think that I don't think I'm necessarily disagreeing with the poll, right? Because as far as Antonio Gibson's concerned, you've heard me in the Patreon say this is his final ride, and I'm not even sure what type of ride it will be. That was back before the Brian Robinson incident. Now I'm actually, somewhat optimistic by necessity, he's going to have to be used a lot. I think it's very possible Antonio Gibson will outperform Pierce, but the market values are so different right now that I guarantee you could get Gibson plus a 2023 second, for a Damian Pierce, because somebody's just trying to get out from Gibson. And that's something I would absolutely do, because again, I just view Damian Pierce as a short-term asset with limited upside in the short term. That's the problem. It's not even like this is a 1 year of a great thing. James Robinson had nobody. We've talked about him before. Volume got him there, even on a bad Jaguars team. Well, I see this situation worse than that situation because, like you said, they love Rex Burkhead. He's going to be there to pester any Damian Pierce truther throughout the year. And that's why I just think, take advantage of the market value. Totally agree with you on a 1 year punt. Damian Pierce is not a guy I want on that at all. I'm moving quickly. I'm doing what I can to get out from that while the iron's hot. And maybe you wait in season, but I wouldn't wait very long because, like you said, injuries happen so often. And imagine, something tragic happens to his leg or something like that in season, you lost your opportunity to sell. So I would just tread lightly if you're going to hang on to him. And the window to sell is now.
Yeah, I mean, the other guy in that situation is Isaiah Pacheco, another guy that I have him on my year one punt in Smash 7, and it's like I am going to wait till he pops off for a couple games, but it becomes a risky situation. You got to look at things like everyone loved Trey Sermon, right? Trey Sermon just got cut, and everybody loved, different position, but Kellen Mond got cut. I mean, we're looking at a NFL where it's what have you done for me lately? And if you have a third or fourth round draft capital, no matter what kind of season you have, there's still uncertainty there, no matter how good you play. I want to transition that into, a lot of people right now seem to be down on Kenneth Walker because of, Rashad Penny hype. People are down right now on Breece Hall because they're saying Michael Carter is the starter, and we know that's not going to last because of the talent that they have there. I have seen trades. Like I said, I saw Pierce and a 24 second for Walker, and I actually saw Pierce and a late 23 first for Breece Hall. I would do that all day. Breece Hall is a legit prospect who has top 3 to 5 dynasty upside when you're talking about that running back position. I think both of those guys are in a buy situation. I mean, Dynasty Jacobian has turned me on to Kenneth Walker because there's a value there now, and then Breece Hall was approaching all the way up to mid-second startup value. That's started to come off now where I'm seeing people letting him be a lot more achievable. And it's like, it's very difficult this time of year to separate the buzz from the noise from what we actually do. And that's what we do at Smash Accept is give you the process. We've been talking about this since February. These are the guys. And that's why we have the Matt Hicks, the Matt Waldman, the Jordan McNamara's come on and tell you about these rookies, right? And what they are. And that way you can have a sound fundamental basis instead of just acting with your heart and saying, yo, I want Damian Pierce. Like, he looks good. He's the highest graded, running back in PFF in the preseason. Who cares? right? Like, that is not where the process was. He was a second round pick the whole way. So if you can get any first, I'm saying, go for it. The other guy, and I want to transition to the similar type thing, is we were talking about the 24 first. I am buying Kenny Pickett everywhere. Okay. And here's why. Like, I have been buying Kenny Pickett for 24 firsts and getting toss-ins. I know I brought it up last podcast that he was my biggest buy at the quarterback position because we're in a weird position for quarterbacks right now, right? You have those elite 6 to 8 quarterbacks, and then you got an area where it's kind of, there's some muddy waters, and then there's Kenny Pickett, right? So Kenny Pickett is in a situation where, I know this is a weird thing to talk about, he's top 10 in jersey sales, so he has the likability. Right now, he has had a fantastic preseason. I mean, the way he has been able to throw the ball, some of the statistics that he has posted up, you're looking at on the preseason right now, he's 29 for 36, 261 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. So he looks the part. You got to look at the weapons, right? We wanted all kinds of people to go to Pittsburgh. We got upset when Mitch Trubisky went there, and we're like, okay, well, Kenny Pickett went there, not a big deal. But it's Deontay Johnson, it's George Pickens, and it's Chase Claypool on top of Pat Freiermuth. I mean, this and Najee Harris. I mean, this is a situation where it is a prime spot for a quarterback. If he starts by week 3, week 4, right now, I believe a lot in when we look at things versus the Vegas odds, he's the front runner right now. Him and Pickens are actually the front runners to win Rookie of the Year. And that is very important because Vegas knows their stuff. They're not putting that out there for nothing. That he has moved up. He's 1 or 2 big mistakes from Mitch Trubisky from becoming a starter. And Josh, we know as soon as a quarterback steps on that field, as soon as he gets that start, that opportunity, that value instantly becomes worth a first.
Yeah, especially in Superflex where it's just hard to get him. Kenny Pickett is probably, I don't remember a recent scenario where there's been one exactly like it where you're right. All the peripherals are good. We know Mike Tomlin's a great coach. We know the weapons are outstanding. The line is suspect, but Pickett is mobile, right? So that's a good thing. Superflex seems to, I guess, because he's not starting right away, his value is a bit depressed. Even to get a quarterback with first-round draft capital, that's another big thing in this too. They're heavily invested in him with that 5th-year option and those things. It's best to acquire now. Now, it's funny you bring this up, and I got to shout out our fellow Patreon member, Kyle Costa, because we've been having some fun negotiations that I wanted to pick your guys' brain live on the pod with, okay? We've been trying to work through a deal involving Kenny Pickett and Chris Godwin. 2 guys that I know we've talked about before, 2 guys that I would both say have values being depressed at the moment, that I believe you have said on the show, Dad, use that 24 first to acquire a Chris Godwin and to acquire a Kenny Pickett. And so this is a really interesting eval for me because you've got Godwin, who's proven, older, obviously, but proven, uncertainty in the future with Brady. And then you've got Kenny Pickett, who nothing about what he can do at an NFL level, but quarterbacks are king in Superflex. So I thought this would be good to bring up in this point, just so you guys can maybe talk me through it. Are they close? Is one more than the other? Are we undervalued on both? Just something to bring up.
Dude, I absolutely love that because I know, both of you guys have been listening for a long time, and those are the guys where last week I said, I've been saying Chris Godwin is one of the biggest buys, period. In last week's pod, I was like, we're looking at a guy who was a wide receiver 2 overall just 2 years ago. He was a wide receiver 1 last year. I feel like he has slightly more value than Kenny Pickett at the current moment in time. I would say, but it's not much of a difference. I think and I talk about this a lot, I think it's like a 2-3 flip. If you could get Pickett and a second for Godwin and a third, I feel like is like perfect value in there. But I think it's what kind of team you have. Like if you are a rebuilding team or you are a team that is, void of quarterbacks, even if you have Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady, Kenny Pickett's the guy to go buy to transition. So then next year you have Patrick Mahomes and Kenny Pickett. And I think I just can't stop buying him. Like I've been doing that 24 first. One was a 24 first even. The other was I got D'Ernest Johnson thrown in. I feel like it's always try to get that extra guy thrown in there. But you have 2 years to recoup your value on Kenny Pickett if you use that first. If you use Chris Godwin, he's 26. He'll be 27 in season. So I think on a contender, Chris Godwin is phenomenal. I think we do this in Dynasty way too often where we write a guy off. I mean, he's 26 years old, and a lot of times, smash 5, 6, and 7, I've drafted him in the wide receiver 25 to 30 range. And he belongs considerably higher than that. And I know you guys have heard me talk enough about both of those. Adam, what do you think of that trade?
I think I'm right on with you, Dad. I think Godwin, the market is slightly higher. I think that the 2-3 flip is good. But I will say both players are definitely buys, regardless of team dynamic, right? Because Pickett is kind of, I'll tell you, like all my 1 year, most of my 1 year punts or just rebuilding teams, I have, I think, an 85 to 90% share of Pickett. He's just a perfect build for that, perfect player for that build. But to your point, Dad, right? Godwin is definitely, you can go either way because you can hold him for midseason when he's actually out there and he's going to gain value. There is some more risk with him. So I would say if for a true rebuild, I lean Pickett. If you can get, to, like you said, the 2-3 flip, that's perfect for me. But they're both definitely buys, and I think they're close in value for sure.
For me, the rumor of missing time and the pup list has created crazy buy low windows for a guy like Chris Godwin. For a guy like Michael Gallup, I'm seeing Gallup get traded for 2/3. He's off the pup list now, guys. Like, if you can still get Michael Gallup on the cheap end after, you want those guys in those high efficiency offenses. You want those guys that are going to get points. I love Godwin. I love the idea of what Pickett is. So I think that's the biggest difference, Josh, for me is I love Chris Godwin, the player. I love the prospect. Kenny Pickett, we're like, let's see what he can be. But we did this every single year. And I'm not saying Kenny Pickett is on the same level, but we had Josh Allen in this same scenario where we said, you know what? He's not worth a first. Let's get him in the late first. Justin Herbert was in that situation, and I'm not saying Kenny Pickett, don't yell at me. I know I'm going to get a bunch of tweet hate on that one. I'm not saying Kenny Pickett is those guys, but he has the round 1 draft capital. He has the likability that is important. He's in a market where they absolutely, it's a great coaching staff. It's a great system. Tomlin's going to get the most out of him. And I just have a feeling that we're looking at a guy that's probably going to be in that QB 12 to 18 range for a couple of years. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 quarterback. He doesn't have the mobility. He doesn't have the rushing upside that these guys do. But I think he's going to be a QB 12 to 18, and that's important when it comes to Superflex. So go
he's
out
the young
there.
Cousins.
Yeah, I almost said it. I love that. And I just bought him in the one league, and people were like, "Yo, Dad, you got 4 quarterbacks." I was like, yeah, I have Jalen Hurts, I have Tom Brady, I have Matthew Stafford, but I'll throw a 24 first in there because those guys are getting older, and that asset is going to appreciate, and you have time. I would not pay a 23 first for Kenny Pickett unless I knew it was 110 to 112. Maybe 108 on the earliest because that class is going to be phenomenal. But I feel like you can finagle around with. I've been trying a pair of 23 seconds. I have offered 3 23 seconds. That didn't get it done. But the 24 firsts, mark my words, guys, that is going to be a good value for you guys to go out there and buy Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, here's an idea real quick I'll throw out there, and then Josh, go ahead. But
go ahead,
just going back to the Pierce thing, I think trading Pierce in a third for Pickett, like that would be a perfect punt team trade for if you happen to get Pierce like we were talking about, and you're trying to flip him for an upside potential. Pickett is a perfect candidate for that. Go ahead, Josh.
I think that's a great call. I mean, anytime you can flip a running back with an unknown future for any quarterback with some upside. I mean, a guy we might talk about later is even Malik Willis. I might even construct something that would give me a nice pick on top of Malik Willis, just because I can at this point in the value of Pierce at the moment. The only thing I wanted to add on to what you were saying is, to your point, Dad, as soon as Pickett becomes starter, if you can acquire him right now for a 2024-1, as soon as he is the starter and flashes anything, you can get a 2024-1 plus a 2024-3 or whatever.
Yeah. That's a quick flip, then that's great.
It's immediately, whether it's a third or a second's worth of value. So even if you're just investing, right? You're just investing in an asset that says, I can get this asset 2024-1 this is not even regarding if he's going to be good or not, but I know that this will appreciate, and I'm going to sell as soon as it does. You get a free 20, maybe it's a 2024 second now that you can get on top or something, so just, that's a little bit different, where sometimes you don't want to get too attached to players because you take opportunities to sell when you can.
Mm-hmm. And I was talking about this about 2 months ago about acquiring Mac Jones for that price. And now Mac Jones is worth considerably more than that, and I think they could be very similar prospects when it comes to fantasy points, both those guys being in that area. You brought up Malik Willis, and I think that's a great transition because that's another guy that you look at the final top 5 rookie power rankings at the end of the preseason. His pick at 1, and Willis has moved himself into 2nd. He was the favorite several months back. I think Malik Willis, I put a tweet out there and people were very angry about this, but I said Malik Willis has the potential for a Jalen Hurts career arc. Did he look as good in the preseason? No. Do we want to watch the highlights of him running, which looks like, Madden 2004, Michael Vick running around out there? Absolutely. I mean, the athletic measurables are phenomenal. Some of the passes that he makes are phenomenal. He's still raw. He's not going to supplant Tannehill right off the bat, And this is a guy that if you are in that situation, I think Malik Willis is a perfect guy for that year 1 punt. He's a perfect guy for your team if it's still building because he has the tools to be like Jalen Hurts. Okay? You guys know I love Jalen Hurts, and I've been talking about I drafted Jalen Hurts on almost all my dynasty teams in a mid to late second. Malik Willis is in that same area, right? And we're talking about he has a great coach. They put Treylon Burks in there. They're going to continue to build around him. The tools are there to be a guy that I'm willing to buy. The tricky part is no one seems to, everybody paid that 2nd round pick. No one seems to be wanting to trade Malik Willis. Are you guys seeing any values out there of obtainable assets, and what are you guys willing to pay?
You want to go first, Adam?
Go ahead, Josh.
All right. Well, it's interesting to me that this Malik Willis is an extremely interesting guy because here's something that we were all giving advice on or receiving the same advice, which was this. If you can sell a 2022 second rounder for a 2023 second rounder, you should probably do that, right? Because of the lack of depth in this class and the incredible depth of the 2023 class. Now, interestingly enough, because of the nature of Superflex and the difference maker at quarterback position, I'm not selling Malik Willis for a 2023 too. And remember, he was drafted most times he was in the 2nd round of these rookie drafts. I'm not selling for that. Do I think that the 2023 2 could be better than Malik? Yeah, sure. But what I've seen in the preseason is enough to show me if he started at all for any team, let alone a well-coached team like the Titans, but if he started with any team, those legs equal fantasy points. And as soon as he gets the opportunity, and people love those Michael Vick-like highlights, as soon as you throw one of those highlights in your group thread and your league, and he's starting a game, whenever that is, oh my goodness. If people are this excited about Dameon Pierce, you talk about a guy with actually legitimate arm talent. Yeah, he's not there. He's not processing things right. It's his rookie year. He has an opportunity to learn with Ryan Tannehill with a good coaching staff, and he's got an electric level of legs. So I can't sell for a 2023 2 just in case he's a Jalen Hurts.
And if you did that 2 years ago, which one of my shares, I did trade him for a second the next year and a toss-in type player because I was diversifying a little bit. Man, does that hurt now? In a running back, they have a 2 to 3 year window. In a quarterback position, a guy like Jalen Hurts, a guy like Malik Willis could be a primetime super flex player for 5 to 6 years, given their particular playing style. And now you're like, you gotta look at that every single day for that long.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. The other thing I'll just add on, I'm personally down on the Tennessee offense this year. Just don't think that it's going to be as good as I think everybody's looking at the last couple of years, and they've had some losses. I think there's age issues. I also think, losing A.J. Brown, right, burying the lead there. And then they're looking at their schedule. So I'm overall not a big Tennessee buyer from their offense in general. But that is the bull case for Willis, right? If you're looking at, and not to go back to Jalen Hurts, but if you look at his situation, very similar when you're talking about, more of an established quarterback, but clearly ownership is not looking for him for the long term, right? It would not shock me the last 2 to 3 weeks of the season, they throw Willis out there, right? It would not shock me whatsoever. And talk about what we're talking about with Pickett. He steps on that field, his value immediately jumps up, and where his value is, and Josh, I think you nailed on the head. He's basically a 23 second and 23 third is what the market is for him right now. So you're talking about major upside. So I definitely think he's definitely a buy, especially for the 1 year punt and rebuilding teams like you mentioned, Dad.
Well, we say you buy Kenny Pickett for a 24 first, right? So you buy Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett becomes a starter. The guy who has Malik Willis needs it. Now all of a sudden you get a 24 first and Malik Willis for Kenny Pickett. You make that kind of move. If you have Dameon Pierce, I think you do that 2-3 flip where you get Malik Willis in a second for Dameon Pierce in a third if you don't need, if you're in that year one punt or you're in that building process. The upside is going to be phenomenal. To Josh's point, you're going to get 6 to 8 rushing points a game like you get from Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, and the throwing is going to be on top of that. When you look at Jalen Hurts, that rookie season when he stepped on the field there towards the end, the passing wasn't pretty, even last year at times. But the rushing upside made him a QB1, and Malik Willis, why we wanted him as the dynasty. We talk in February when I talked to Derek Brown, the 101 of dynasty was not Breece Hall, it was Malik Willis, and that's where we were, and we just kept seeing the draft stock fall. So time will tell. It's an interesting prospect. The other two guys I wanted to talk about real quick, Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder. Both of them had pretty decent camps. And I'm going to start with you, Josh, because we'll start with Sam Howell with you and then kick it over to Adam on Desmond Ridder. What are the prospects that we see either of these guys this year? Because I think we're looking at Ridder's probably going for a second. Sam Howell might be approaching that second round value. To me, still maybe more like a pair of threes. But being our Washington guy, hit on Sam Howell for us a little bit.
Yeah, we really need Dynasty Howellians in here, right?
Dude, he's going to be so excited. This is 2 weeks in a row. He got some play for Sam Howell. For you guys, it's a little bit inside, but he started, I started talking about Dynasty quarterbacks maybe like 3 months ago, talking about rookies and stuff like that. And he changed his Twitter handle to Dynasty Howlians, and he just puts tweets in there, and I tell him to get out of the group chat whenever he does that.
Yeah, and I don't know if he would like what I have to say. The Commanders are one of the few teams where I can honestly say this. There are 3 legitimate scenarios where I could see one of the 3 quarterbacks on their roster starting at some point this year. Carson Wentz, of course, he's really on a 1-year prove-it deal. They can cut him for 0 cap hit next year. It is a totally team-friendly deal. That's why they did the trade. Yeah, they probably overpaid relative to Matt Ryan's cost and those things. From a franchise perspective, though, he is not the future if he doesn't light it up this year, which means if we are not competitive by mid-season, 3/4 of the way through the season, the writing is on the wall where he's not going to be there next year, which means who do you throw in? Do you throw in Taylor Heineke? Because I think they've got plenty of look at him. He's not the answer. So who do you throw in? Sam Howell. There's a very legitimate chance where if the Commanders are not contending, which I think they're going to be middle of the road, so I'm not optimistic they won't at least be in the hunt, which means I don't think Sam Howell will see the field this year, really. But there is a chance that if they're not contending, he could come in and make a case for himself as a starter or a bridge starter for next year, which certainly has more value than 2 threes. Right.
And so, I think you're right on with that, because I was talking about it with someone. I made a trade. I got Deebo Samuel from Dynasty Jacobian for DK Metcalf and Sam Howell. And I think Deebo, I'm on a win now team, and he wanted to build a little bit. And he goes, well, Sam Howell could be the starter. And I said, for me, there's one scenario where his value goes up, right? So if they're just good enough, it's going to be Tyler Heineke. Like, he's going to be there if they're even remotely in that chance. If he gets a start towards the end of the year, that means Washington was not in contention, and they will be taking a quarterback. So like there's a small scenario there where they're just good enough that they miss out on some of these these upside quarterbacks that are in the draft. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a weird scenario. There's just such a small window where Sam Howell is the quarterback for 2023. You know, it's just like it's got to be almost like what Adam said, where they're in a scenario where 2 games left and they're not in contention. Carson Wentz is out. Sam Howell looks good for 2 weeks, and then we get a scenario where we can flip him.
Right, and just before we transition to Ritter, because Ritter's more exciting anyway, but here's why I would say we recommend things in context of the type of dynasty owner you are. Meaning, if you are the type of dynasty manager that is active and taking advantage of market swings, sure, acquire Sam Howell for cheap, and if there's ever a flash of anything, he'll increase in value and flip him right away. I'm not recommending acquiring Howell if you're not an active dynasty owner that's just hoping he pans out, because he's not going to be the long-term starter unless I guess there's a small chance of that. But if you're not willing to go with the market and flip when the time's right, don't acquire him. Don't even waste your time. But if you're willing to do it, you can be savvy and make a profit at some point this year.
For sure. And Adam, real quick on Ritter, what type of value are you seeing out there? He slipped to the 13th round in Smash 7. He went the pick before me. I was a little heated because I was like, man, it felt like the right value there for me because I feel like there's a scenario where he gets on the field, quicker than anyone else potentially this season.
Yeah, the values that I'm seeing for Ritter, he's, of course, been going up in value recently, even though slightly. I actually haven't – I've seen him go similarly like values to Willis, like we were just talking about, is what I've been seeing. So for me, I definitely, of course, prefer Willis way above Ritter. So yes. For me, from a market value standpoint, love the buy, but I think the play for Ritter personally, and I totally agree with Josh, so know your league on the activity levels, but just in a vacuum, I think Ritter is a great kind of watch list player, because I do think Mariota with his legs, and I do think that offense will be improved with throwing in London and the improvements to their line. I do think that that's going to be a position where Ritter, it's similar to like we're talking about, might have a year-end end season, but I think people are getting a little excited in the near term, where I think is probably going to be a better buy when week 2, week 3, where his value likely depreciates comparatively because folks are a little bit more into Mariota. I'm actually been a buyer of Mariota personally in this offseason, and he looks good, especially with the talent around him. So that's my personal play, but the valuation is close to Willis, so that's where I much prefer Willis right now.
And the nice thing with Ritter is you get some of that baked-in rushing upside as well. I mean, 365 yards rushing. He's a guy that 97th percentile when it comes to speed on his 40 time. So definitely another upside guy out there. I wanted to give, since we were talking Dameon Pierce, I wanted to give a shout out to Josh. I mean, the thread that you put out there on Jahan Dotson was awesome. I loved it. If you had to guess right now if Twitter prefers Dameon Pierce or Jahan Dotson right now, who are you guessing?
I would have to guess Dameon Pierce.
It's 60-40 right now on a Twitter poll we're running. So tell me why that is foolish and why people are not high enough on Jahan Dotson. This is your platform here, because I'm with you. Like, we're going to talk about, Adam and I are really going to go into detail on Pickens next. I want you to talk about Dotson. Those were the 2 wide receivers I found myself drafting everywhere in that second round early on.
Here, let me preface it by saying this. As a Commander fan, I am a noted skeptic when it comes to all of their draft picks. They don't always draft well. This is not a homer take. This is a fantasy football take that I'm seeing a value depressed that you need to take advantage of. And so I believe Jahan Dotson is the most undervalued 2022 rookie for these reasons. One, here's what your ideal scenario that you would want in a rookie is this. They are talented, they have opportunity, and their peripherals look good. Those 3 things, those are the big 3 things. So you have some cases like Breece Hall where the talent is there. It will win opportunity eventually, but not right now. And then you have guys like Dameon Pierce, who their player profiler, it's not nearly as impressive as Breece Hall, not even close, and yet he's got opportunity, but not that talent. So he's a sell. to me. We buy those with talent that don't have opportunity because that's going to win out. But then you have the unique few that have talent, and we're talking about Jahan Dotson, 91st percentile dominator rating, 96th percentile target share in the Big Ten at a university with terrible quarterback play. You have the talent. He's got amazing crisp routes. He doesn't drop anything, and he plays bigger than he actually is. You know who he comps like? Terry McLaurin, who's about the same size with the same skill set. So you're talking about very similar guys. You have the talent, and then you have opportunity. In the preseason and throughout all of camp, he's running with the ones opposite Terry McLaurin. You've got a guy in the slot with Curtis Samuel who's often injured. Jahan Dotson's not leaving the field when it comes to playing in the slot or outside. He doesn't have to be the alpha. He doesn't even have the defense's attention. And then the third thing, you go to peripherals. The peripherals would be team situation, game script, quarterback, those types of things. One peripheral that you look for is first-round draft capital. You're talking about a guy that the team is heavily invested in relative to Chris Olave and Jameson Williams as well, who they gladly traded down to get their guy Dotson. Whether they should have, that's up to you. But they did. They love him, which means he's going to get opportunity. He's going to get run. He's not on a short leash. He's starting on the weekly. He's got draft capital to support it. He's going to have a long leash. And then you go to situation. I'm a Commanders fan. I know our defense is terrible. Terrible. They did nothing to address it. We are going to be giving up a lot of points, which means you're talking about shootouts. You're also talking about, a team that doesn't have the run game like Carson Wentz and the Colts did last year. Carson Wentz is not going to be able to hide at all. He's not going to be able to hide behind a good line that lost Brandon Scherf. He's got no running game even close to JT. And you know what that means? He's going to throw the ball a lot. And you know what else we know about Carson Wentz? He doesn't like throwing to his running backs. He loves to just lob the ball down the field. And who's down the field? Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, that are going to be running across from each other. So you're talking about a guy that has all three things checked off for me. Talent, opportunity, peripherals, that is being drafted in the early to mid second round of a depressed rookie class. This is absurdity. So that is why if I can trade Dameon Pierce for Jahan Dotson straight up, I'm gladly doing it. But here's the thing, you don't even have to. That poll suggests that you can get Dameon Pierce in a 3 for Jahan Dotson in a 2 or something like that. And those are absolutely deals that I'm smashing every single day of the week. Love Jahan Dotson, and I think he's just extremely undervalued.
Great analysis, man. I couldn't have said it better myself. I mean, I love that. I got Jahan Dotson in Smash 4 at like 204. Could not have been more excited about that because I think that's great value. And Pierce went after him, and we're at a spot now where you can make that flip, you can make that change, and I think that is a great area. Adam, the other part of this podcast is we really wanted to talk about George Pickens. So on the flip side, George Pickens' camp hype is higher than what Pierce is. I mean, it's 78-22 in that same kind of poll. Those all guys were all taken in that same area. There are some Pickens deals out here that are quite interesting, and I think we talked about it a couple of weeks ago. I am in the camp of we have a guy here who, if he didn't get injured, the draft capital would have been higher, and he looks the part of a true alpha wide receiver. The Deontay Johnson re-signing, I think, stings a little bit to be that clear-cut number one. But, Adam, what are some trades you're seeing? And talk to me a little bit about George Pickens.
Yeah, he's just a fascinating prospect, right? I mean, you're talking about player, you have not only the team that is renowned. There's not a team that's renowned more than the Steelers and picking later round talent. Now, he's not a late round talent, right? He was picked in the second round. To your point, Dad, has first round type of talent. So that's well known, injury risk, but certainly upside. Trades that I'm seeing with him are kind of, like him for a Christian Watson and a 23 second. I've seen that. Picks where you can effectively, insulate, which is the coined phrase on this podcast, right? Trying to find ways where you can cash out on him. But I will also say that even though that his looking at his, where he's gone up, he hasn't gone up to the point where I think he's overvalued either. I think that if you can potentially get a good steal on the buy side, I think the spreads are pretty small with him, meaning that it's not like a Pierce where you are seeing some wide variant in values on the trades. I think in Pickens, you have your believers that already have him, but then you might have some folks that are willing to make a quick flip on him. And I think those are the kind of players that I wanted to buy from, especially for your, really for any team, but especially like a 1-year punt is perfect in my mind. So for him, he profiles like a Jerry Jeudy, right? If you're talking about his metrics, but I like him better personally, not only because of the situation, not that I don't like Wilson throwing Jeudy the ball, but if you're looking at longevity, and if you're looking at that he potentially, I think he's first round talent, even though he got drafted in the second, to your point, Dad. I just love him as a long-term play. So for me, even though he's gone up in value, he's one of the few that I think that you could actually see a big pop off in value, especially, would not surprise me if week 1 he gets a bomb from Mitch and he is just, the craze of the regular season.
This is still a guy that I think you can go out there and buy. I mean, 6'3", 200 pounds, early breakout age. He's still just 21 years old. You alluded to it, but on playerprofiler.com, his best comparable player is Jerry Jeudy. I think Pickens is still a value, and I don't think it's going to be by week 6. I think by week 6, his value is going to go up a little bit. And if you're in a situation, again, we talked about it with the quarterbacks, but with the wide receivers, and you're in a situation where you have there's the elite couple players, and then there's that rounds 3 through 5 where we have a lot of guys in that 27, 28-year-old range where I feel like if you go off down into Pickens, you can get some serious value added on, in an area where you could even get, I could see transitioning just from a Keenan Allen. I could see you transition down, from, there's a lot of guys in that area, even a Terry McLaurin. You just get yourself younger and give yourself more upside. Pickens is a player.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Dad. If you had a second, just to you guys, I've been seeing, just to kind of put this in perspective of a few names that I wanted to have you guys rank for me, because I've seen Pickens go for a 2023 one. I have seen it straight up. I've seen it multiple times actually. But I wanted to see what you guys thought, just to put the value of Pickens in perspective with these 4 assets. Late 2023 one, George Pickens, Brandon Ayuk, and Gabe Davis. These are guys that I've seen go in similar areas of startups. I've seen Pickens more so shipped out for that late 2023 one. But are we talking about these assets being close? I've seen some guys that are like, I love Ayuk. We have some noted Ayuk truthers in our Patreon that would have him first. But do we see any of those really ahead of the other ones, or are they all kind of close? I just wanted to kind of ask you that to put Pickens' value in perspective.
To clarify again, that was the late 23 first.
Yep.
Pickens.
Yep.
Ayuk, and the fourth one was
Gabe Davis.
Gabe Davis. Okay. For me, and I know based off of trade values, I would say it's 23 first, Pickens, and then Ayuk, and last would be Gabe Davis. But I think this is an interesting scenario where I was in Smash 7, and I was talking with John, and I was like, yo, who do I take here? And I did take Ayuk above Pickens at that time because there was a lot of hype with him. And as I can see a scenario here where you, in that area of the draft, and I believe that's, your rounds 8 through 10 of your dynasty startup, you have to tell yourself narratives and believe one way or another, because I think Amon-Ra St. Brown was in that. I know you don't like him, but there's like a lot of guys in that area, right, that are like, depending on how you speak to it, you can breathe life into that. And I think if I had 110 to 112, I'm really close with Pickens. I have Ayuk slightly off. I would not pay a late first for Ayuk yet. And like I see a lot with Jimmy Garoppolo re-signing with San Francisco and potential, not 100% believing in Trey Lance. Don't tell anybody that. But Trey Lance being able to support Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and Kittle, where I think Pickens is going to move to number 1 in that depth chart within the next year for sure because of that alpha-type mentality. And I think Gabe Davis is another guy. We talked about that before we jumped on here. Is like Gabe Davis, you could tell me he's going to have 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns and be worth the 23 first. and I would believe it. And I would also believe that if you told me he had 500 yards and struggled, I would also believe that, because we're in a situation where he struggled to get on the field last year. And when he did towards the end, he popped off. But that's kind of how I see it, is those four. I would say that 23 first, and really depending on where you're at, and what your needs are. I have Pickens really close. Then I drop down just a little bit for Ayuk, and then I drop down again for Gabe Davis. How do you see that, Adam?
Yeah, the for me, it's definitely the 23 first is like its own tier above the three, even the late one. But I do think that the other three are close enough, and kind of to your point, Dad, you can make an argument for all three depending on not only the team but also talent. Because I would say Pickens as a talent is better than Gabriel Davis, but Davis is in a superior situation, right? So that's where team dependency for me leans me the other way. So not to cop out, but I think that it has to be said here. And I do think IU comes with, has the upside, I would say not as much as Davis, but comes with more risk. So for that reason, I have Davis 2, Pickens 3, IU 4, but they're close. I think you can pick them apart based off of situation of the team. But I'll just say too, a huge Gabe Davis fan myself, but I would say Josh made an excellent point at the beginning of the pod, is that part of his good analysis with Dotson is that talent will prevail at the end. Mm-hmm. So you have to, especially for a longer term 1 year punt or rebuild, that's where I would pick Pickens over Davis. But with that said, again, you got to consider the risks and the upside for all these players.
And we talked about year one punts, trying to get in that round 7, 8, 9. I mean, you have your Elijah Moore, and Godwin falls into that area. Jamison Williams, Devonta Smith, Chris Olave, Darnell Mooney, Sky Moore. That was Brandon Ayuk, Gabe Davis. They were all in that area. And I feel like that's where, you can – those are the guys that can have some serious upside where, Josh, if you believe in one of those guys more than the other, and I never advocate making those 1-for-1, trading a wide receiver for a wide receiver, and unless – try to get a secondary piece. So, depending where you're at, a lot of people you might be high on Gabe Davis, I might be high on Pickens, and we do a trade where, you get Davis, I get Pickens, then you get a running back that you prefer. And I talk about it a lot, where you're actually winning twice if you hit the way you want it to go and you're getting your guys. How does that line up with what we were saying? Do you have it pretty close with those four?
Yeah, I think, the year one punt is very interesting to me, because I view George Pickens as a perfect year one punt asset. I think Adam even mentioned that. I think George Pickens will shine. He'll have his moments this year, but it's really going to be next year and beyond. So that's why the conversation of a late 2023 one and Pickens is interesting to me, because you're talking about both assets being realized near the same time. Now, the only way that I would choose Pickens over a 2023 first is if I thought this year his value could exceed that. Mm-hmm. I don't see a way that happens with a Pickett or Mitch-led Steelers team with Freiermuth, Claypool, and Deontay. I don't see how that would exceed a 2023 first. So therefore, it's way safer to just prefer the 2023 one, no matter how late it is. So that I agree with you all. 2023 one is first. Gabe Davis would be last, because of all those wide range of outcomes. I could see an incredible year for Gabe Davis, like 900 yards and 12 touchdowns. I could see a ridiculous amount of touchdowns for him, even if the yardage is not there. I'm just a little worried about what that's going to look like. So I understand he could be the best of the whole crew. I'd probably take, in a contending team, I'd rather have Ayuk. I think he's really going to shine this year, even if you believe in whether or not you believe in Trey Lance. I think he's really taken a step. So I'd probably rank it 2023 1. Ayuk and Pickens are both interchangeable for me, depending on build, and then Gabe Davis, just because of the uncertainty. I didn't mean to cut you guys off there. I just thought this is an interesting thing to discuss, because Pickens is, I guess I'm at the point where I'd probably buy him for a 2023 and 2024 second, maybe. Like 2 seconds, I'm in, I think.
I think the key with it all, and I brought it up last week, is it's a 24 first. I feel like that's what you're going to have to pay. And the nice part is, if you believe in the prospect, I was out on the 22 class. Now I'm starting to like some of them, and I'm willing to throw 24 capital that way. and I feel like you might be able to get something in there. But if you believe in Pickens, you give up a 24 first. Now you have 2 years to see where that, you have some time to develop to get more onto that value. And I think, to your point, with the reason I have 23 first over both of them is right now, I mean, if you look at draft capital, a 23 first you can buy. I saw Drake London go in my FFPC for a 23 first. I saw DK Metcalf go for a 23 first. DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, like all these guys, even more so, like, you look at being able to get a contender, you could get McLaurin plus in that 23 first. You could get Keenan Allen, where if you are a contender with that late first, you can buy something a little bit more here and now to go win that championship.
Well, and that's smart to say, because asset management is part of Dynasty, right? And knowing you can really be in on a player, but not draft them in a rookie draft and wait till later to buy them. For example, Dotson, who I just ranted about, I did not draft him in a single rookie draft. However, after the draft, I acquired 4 shares, and that's and I have trades to show you that, but like. You can view it when you're on the clock in a rookie draft. Everybody's super excited. They don't want to trade away their pick because they just want the rush of clicking draft, right? But afterwards, when the asset becomes more boring, like a Jahan Dotson, where you're like, oh yeah, he's on the Commanders, he's got Carson Wentz, then you go and buy. It's all relative to cost. And I actually had an interesting trade with Dotson and Malik Willis that I thought would be cool to at least discuss for a second. But I traded Terry McLaurin and Marcus Mariota, who Adam's buying. Mariota truther, I heard. Who Adam's buying, and I got Jahan Dotson, a 2024 first, and Malik Willis. So this is a 16-team league, by the way. So I guess the context is set there. But that was me trying to buy low on Malik, getting a player I believe in Dotson, and trying to protect it with a 2024 first. I'm a contending team, so it's a little bit risky, but would you guys do that? Is that not something you would do?
I love the upside of what you're going to be able to potentially do with that if you wanted to, or if Dotson comes off. I mean, if you told me I could get Dotson in a 24 first for McLaurin's 27, I believe Dotson's 21, maybe 22. Yep. You're resetting the clock and getting that insulated value. Malik Willis is a clear upgrade over Mariota. And I think a lot of people struggle with that kind of trade this time of year, right? Is they want Keenan Allen, they want Devontae Adams, they want those kind of things. And it's a great time if you believe in that next prospect up. You guys know that I've, dealt Hopkins in the past for DK Metcalf in a first, his rookie year. And I was like making moves like that where it's like, right now I have Devontae Adams and I'm trying to get Diggs in a second, or I'm trying to get DJ Moore in a first, or, you get that 80% in there. So I personally love the deal. I think, unfortunately, McLaurin is a better player than his value is, in my opinion. I think he could have a fantastic season, and I believe he could be a back-end wide receiver 1. That's my only, leery part in there. But I feel like by getting Dotson, I believe mid-season you'll be able to buy Keenan Allen for a 24 first if that is your requirement to fill in that spot.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't really have much to add except that I'm not a truther, but I will say I think McLaurin is a perfect asset to, I think, to diversify, and that's effectively what you're trying to do here with the upside potential. So love it.
Guys, this was a fun podcast. I mean, this is the longest we've gone on a podcast, and I think the three of us think very similarly, but it was a great vibe, a lot of great points that both of you guys make. Again, I want both you guys to drop your Twitter handle when we're done here, but these are some guys that really deserve some more follows in the Dynasty community. Great minds, always willing to answer questions. Literally, like, I know you guys DM me all the time, but I text these guys, and I'm just like, verify what some of my thinking is and try to talk to that. So thanks again for both of you guys coming on. Adam, I'll let you close first, anything that you're working on, and then your handle, so more of our listeners can follow you guys.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it as always. Good to have Josh on as well. And my Twitter handle is r_Adam Armour. So that's Armour spelled ARMOUR. And I've been a little slightly light on the Twitter lately, just because with the markets, and I'm a financial advisor, things have been crazy. But whenever I see DMs or certain things that excite me, I jump right on it, because there's a lot of time right now and going into the season next week here on the 11th. So super stoked. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. And Josh, first podcast out of the way. Great job. Why don't you tell everybody where they can find you as well?
Yeah, on Twitter it's at JB_Shepherd, and I've just really enjoyed the time. I've got a couple of threads that I've been just kind of diagramming a little bit, and that's so you can look forward to maybe a Wan'Dale Robinson thread. And actually Malik Willis has really struck my attention, because there's a lot of conversation going on. So just some guys that I like to consider that I think might be a good buy at a good price. But just a note to all the listeners too, I play in leagues with these guys. These guys are legit. They're active. They know what they're talking about, and they practice what they talk about too. So just a vote of confidence for all the listeners. They do exactly what they're talking about. So legit guys and good guys.
Appreciate that. Again, I know the guys that are in the Smash Patreon aren't going to want to hear this, but guys, it is a surefire way to put yourself ahead of your competition. There's so many guys there in that group chat that are like, I said, hey, we're going to offer a referral bonus. You guys can get some money if you guys recruit new people. They're like, we don't want anybody from our leagues in here, because these guys are in here. We have some of the sharpest guys out there, and if you guys want to join, again, hit me up in the DM. I'll have to check to see if there's anybody in your league, so they'll try to kick you out. No, but these guys are in there. They're always talking. I want to thank both of you guys for being so active with that, and I want to thank you guys, the listeners, for tuning in, and enjoy the process.